Hi everyone, I'm Shubhendu. I head marketing at Gallup Solutions. Welcome to Gallup Solutions webinar today on continuous integration testing using Microsoft test tools right before your eyes. Let me take this opportunity to introduce Gallup. We are a 10-year-old US-based co-located independent software testing services company with offices in Dallas and Philadelphia. Our services are backed by proprietary testing IP, enterprise test acceleration suite for enhanced productivity, and in-house R&D teams. We are a 100% subsidiary of Signity Technologies, which is the world's third largest independent software testing services company. World's leading organizations have relied on our testing services for more than a decade, and they have achieved significant market acceleration returns on their investments in software quality initiatives. This webinar is the third one in Gallup's webinar series termed Right Before Your Eyes. Our earlier webinars were on performance testing in the cloud and mobile test automation right before your eyes. Let me take a moment to introduce the speaker for the day. Mr. Ravi Sindri is a senior test automation architect at Gallup Solutions. Ravi has over 13 years of experience in IT industry in software development and testing. His core expertise lies in information modeling, business analysis, design, development, testing, implementation, and support of distributed client-server and web-based applications for diverse industries, including BFSI, education, semiconductors, digital map data, aviation, and retail. Ravi provides guidance to automation testing teams at Gallup on best practices around test automation. Over to you, Ravi.
In this session, we are going to see how we can achieve continuous integration using Microsoft tools. So we will talk about the overall concept, and we will also look at how this entire setup can be done in live. Okay, so for this purpose we have developed a kind of a sample project or a demo project which you can see in action how the entire setup has been done, and how continuous integration and how continuous testing from within continuous integration. So I'm moving to the next slide. So basically, when we are talking about continuous integration, it is very important for us to understand agile testing, and then I will cover, as I said, I will cover something about the continuous integration concepts. Then we will look at the team foundation server and the VSTS offerings or various features or various configuration settings and all that stuff. And then we will get into the framework, where I will explain you the conceptual view of the framework so that you guys will get a feel. Okay, when we are talking about CI and when we are talking about the whole setup of Microsoft tools, so how a typical framework should look like, what are the aspects or what are the components that need to be covered. So going to the next slide, let's look at what Agile testing says. So as you can see here, so when we are talking about Agile testing, so this is the typical methodology, okay, and it depends. It depends on your organization. It depends on you, how you define your methodology. But when it comes to Gallup, because we have been doing continuous integration or agile testing projects all through, and we have done many projects, and we have learned from our past experiences. So we have defined this process. When you look at a high level, so the typical activities that are involved in Agile are understand the user stories. So the user stories basically describes the user behavior, goals, and the acceptance criteria. So it is very important for us to understand the user story, then do a prototype. So when we are talking about Agile, because the life cycle or the it goes or it follows the iteration model, and if you look at these sprints, it would be the heartbeat would be around 2 to 3 weeks. That is the time frame that the development people will look at. So it is very important for them for the development guys to have the prototype ready, and I will explain you how these prototypes can be used, for testing purposes, and how this prototype can be used for test automation also. And then once the prototypes are ready and once a unit is ready, so we do a kind of a demo, and then we discuss, we brainstorm, we debate, and then we refine the whole unit that is developed. And once these units are developed, the units will get integrated with other systems or other components in the whole system under test. And once the integration is done, so till this point, till this integration point, we basically do unit testing, we do module level functionality testing, and we do incremental integration testing. And then once the whole system is ready, once these moving parts, all these components are talking each other, so that is when we will do the user acceptance testing or the user testing from the user point of view. And when you look at the development team's activities, so again, I have already covered these things, so you can refer here. So they will try to understand the requirements from the user stories, and they will derive at the functional points, or they will derive at the backlog items, and then these backlog items will go into or get into the sprint, and everyone will start working on the sprints, and there will be multiple sprints going on and all that stuff. And on the other side, if you look at the manual testing team and the automation team, we will use the same user stories as the base, and based on the acceptance criteria, we will start writing the test cases, where we will start doing the groundwork for test automation. And when it comes to prototypes, so what happens is, like, because in case of Agile, generally people don't prefer to have heavy documentation, so we use the prototypes, we explore that, and then we'll start writing the low-level steps for the test cases. Similarly, we'll also write the end-to-end scenarios once a unit or once a component is developed, and similarly once the components are integrated. So I'm moving to the next slide. Okay, so when we are talking about Agile, again we'll have to make sure that we have the best practices in place. The reason being, Agile demands a lot of collaboration, because there are multiple teams located in distributed locations, and they are working in parallel on their individual components or units. So it is basically very important for them to be work in a collaborative way. So that is why, like, we have something called certain tools or portals that will be in place in companies to provide visibility of what is happening in individual teams and all that stuff. So generally people implement wiki and all those types of tools to make sure that the team are working in a collaborative way, and it is very important for them to have a centralized repository as well. And then acceptance criteria need to be defined properly, and we need to understand the business requirements, we need to prioritize the requirements, and then based on that plan the whole activities. And then obviously continuous learning, you have to have a knowledge base, as I said, wiki or something, where all individual teams will be sharing their thought process, and all the requirements, test cases, and everything will be recorded in the knowledge sharing portal. Then a centralized governance, because it is very important that the multiple teams are working on various parts of the system, and everyone should follow a common architecture or a common processes, and they should have the proper guidelines and all that stuff. So it is very important to have a governance at a high level, governance but at a high level, and they define the standards, and they will have to make sure that all individuals are following those standards. And then yes, defect prevention. So just to minimize the leakage of defects into production, we have to have a proper system in place. and then continuous integration. So when we are talking about Agile, you see mostly people are talking about continuous integration because that plays a key role in the Agile best practices. So where people are working from various locations and working on their code base, and they're checking into the system, and we'll have to make sure that each check-in is not breaking the whole system. So that is where this whole continuous integration will come into picture. So this little bit insight about the continuous integration. So integrate and build fast is one criteria of the continuous integration. Then have the automated build hands off, where the whole process, end-to-end process, which includes both the SDLC and SDLC, has to be completely automated and should run unattended. And then code inspection and quality. So we have to have a mechanism in the CI which will continuously monitor the code, and it does the code static code analysis, or find out code profiling and all that stuff, and make sure that the code that is getting developed or check-in into the continuous integration build server is of good quality. So until unless the code is good quality, the downstream jobs will not be triggered. The reason being, there is no point if the build is breaking and the whole other jobs are running, and it is very obvious that everything else will fail. And in the similar lines, if you look at the self-testing of build environment, so when we are talking about continuous integration, so the whole setup, we will see in the next slide how it looks like, but different teams will have their objectives to be met. Say the system testing team will have the system test environment, and the integration team will have their own environment, system integration environment, and then the user acceptance team will have the user acceptance environment. At the same time, on the other side, if you look at the development team will have their own development environment, and they will have the their own staging servers and all that stuff. So this entire environment has to be self-tested. So when we are spinning the automation or testing onto the environment, it has to be it has to be up and running. So to make sure it is up and running, we have to have a job configured in CI. And another important aspect of continuous integration is detect the defects early in the life cycle or while doing the code development at the unit level, so that it prevents defects getting multi-folded into various other phases of the entire application development. And then obviously, once we have this CI process, once we have the dashboards properly defined, once we have the metrics captured, so it will publish the results and the key areas of the or the key metrics to the stakeholders, and this process has to be done automatic, so that all the stakeholders are are tracking what is happening, how is the build health, and plan accordingly. So this is how the typical framework would look like, CI framework. So we have both the development team and the testing team. So both the teams are working hand in hand in parallel. So once the development team checks in the code into the repository server, automatically the build process will be triggered. So once the build process is triggered, it promotes the build to the build repository, but before that, the build process will make sure that the build is not failed and is of good quality for the further or for the downstream jobs. So once the CI server makes sure the build is of good quality and it's not failed, so basically it deploys the build onto the test environment. And this is where we see a couple of environments, on which the build will be deployed, and the build will be labeled based on its type. So when I say the build is labeled, the build will be labeled like it's meant for QA release, or it's meant for pre-production, or it's meant for production, or etc. So based on that build, based on the release type, based on the label, the testing team will pick that build. So testing team will have their own repository. It could be the same server on which the code base is there, or it could be a different server setup. And this repository will contain all test artifacts or test automation artifacts. And these, in case of test automation, these scripts will be triggered automatically based on the build process status. So the build process will make sure that the build is, once the build process gives the status saying that the build has been deployed onto the testing environment successfully, basically there will be a job which will be created in the build process and test integration server that will basically trigger the automated scripts. So once the scripts are triggered, the scripts will run automatically, over the night, or based on the schedule, or for every check-in or whatever, and then it keeps on publishing the test results onto the repository. And these results can be pulled from the repository to display, to generate various dashboards on the developers' desktop machines, or on the displays, or on the mobile device, or through email, or whatever medium you want these results to be reached to the stakeholders. So, and then we have the bug tracking, once the results are published, once we analyze the results, depending on the defects, either you can have a job created in the CI server saying that here there is a defect, and you raise a you post that defect into one of the servers, so, or one of the defect management tools, and we will see how Microsoft tools will help us, or how the tools, what is the capability of that tool, and how it enables us to do each one of these activities, including the defect tracking and all that stuff. So based on the defects, status, if the defects are fixed, so again the testing team will analyze, and again this whole process will be triggered, which is called a kind of a retesting. So you can have different jobs configured saying that this is for the whole regression testing suite, and this is for smoke, or this is for retesting, and all that stuff. You can always label it, and you can create subset of test cases. So if you look at the architecture or the environment, the entire framework, whatever we have seen in the previous slide, that is translated, or we have taken to the next level, where you get to see the systems, you get to see various servers, and then you have the build server, or the continuous integration server, which basically deploys the build onto various machines, and which basically generates various logs here. And based on your release process, based on your deployment process or configuration, it takes the build from the build repository, and deploys onto various servers. So you can have a remote dev, you can have integration, or you can have a system testing environment and all that. And once that is done, so we have the system testing team, and we have the system integration testing team, basically doing testing on this and sending the feedback to the repository server. And this complete process happens based on your development process here. So once you check in the code or check out the code, it automatically does the get latest, and based on that it basically triggers the whole process. So if you look at a complex test farm, this is how it looks like. You have a couple of build servers, you have the SCM system, or the configuration management system in place. Then you might be having a local test farm, and in case of a complex application, you might want your application to be deployed or tested on various environment where you wanted to do on the VM or something like that. And then on the other side you have your drivers, and you have a controller, and this driver will communicate through the switch that you have, or through the cloud or the internet, and it basically targets the execution onto these test forms, and then it generates various results, dashboards, and um, uh, and it posts the defects in the defect management system and all that stuff. So you can always see the trend, how the build health is looking like, from the previous release to this release and all that stuff. So all those trends and all those metrics and everything can be captured and archived in the database server, or for that matter any server. This is the execution process which we already have discussed. So I'm just skipping this. So basically whatever I've explained, so I put it in the in a flow diagram format here. So I'm just skipping this one. This is something very important. The frequency of test execution. So as you can see here, the steps here 1 to 8 are the phases, I would say. So these phases includes both the development activities and the testing activities. And when you are setting up a continuous integration or a continuous testing environment, I mean, typically this is the recommendation that the industry says that, okay, for dev team to check the to run the unit test, to test the build code, it should be for every check-in. So the moment the major check-in happens into the repository server, automatically all this process should be triggered and everything should be done. And for remote dev kind of environment, where basically the testing team will come into picture, it should be on a nightly basis. So there is no hard and fast rule that you have to follow these frequencies, but yeah, it's up to you. This is a recommended and optimized way of setting up the continuous integration server. So, and when it comes to integration, either you can go for nightly execution or on a scheduled basis. Now we'll have a look at what TFS and VSTS offers. So the reason why we wanted to stress more on the Microsoft toolset, because it provides a unified platform, as you can see here. So whatever we have seen, the test environment or the configuration settings or the setup of various servers, various controllers, repository management, configuration management system, defect management system, and then the quality management system and all that stuff. So if you go with any other tool that is there in the market when compared to Microsoft, at least you have to depend on more than one tool. So in that case, when we are saying more than one tool, so more than one skill set is required, and the complexity is double, because you have to maintain both the tools, and you have to take care of the maintenance of those tools, and training the people and all that stuff. So but when it comes to Microsoft offerings or Microsoft tools, the setup is done such a way that TFS lies in the middle. I mean, it's a centralized repository server, and which will be integrated with all other components, your project management, requirements management, version control, then your quality management, test cases management, your build automation, and reporting. So this basically integrates with all these systems, and each one of these systems have their own interfaces. Okay, so if you look at Visual Studio, I mean, these are the basically various subscriptions, types of subscriptions of Visual Studio, which offers Test Professional, then your Ultimate Premium, and Visual Studio Professional and all that. So each one of these offerings have certain certain components enabled or disabled kind of a thing. So if you wanted to have the complete setup in place, and if you wanted to have the complete end-to-end set end-to-end environment, then it is always advised to go for premium and ultimate, in which you will get the complete all the modules or all the components, and you can have one common platform for everyone to do their work effectively. So these are the components and the features. So the components are the team foundation server, TFS, then VSTS, and then test manager and coded UI. So TFS, as I said, it offers all the test management components, and then the lab management components, build configuration, source repository management, and then the whole setup of continuous integration, and you can configure the build schedules, or you can configure the iterations and all that stuff. And then Visual Studio, if you look at, it provides an IDE, intuitive IDE for the developers or for the testers to develop the code base or to develop the solutions quickly and easily, with so many built-in components, built-in features, and built-in wizards and all that stuff. And then you have the test manager, which basically focuses on the testing part of it, where based on the requirements defined, you can create a test project, you can create plans, and then you can add testing related requirements. Then you can create a test suite or subset the test cases to create various suites, and then run the tests, capture the details, capture the execution details, then post the defects, track the defects, and what else, like you can do, you can achieve everything in one system basically. Coded UI again a built-in offering of Visual Studio or TFS, which basically enables the automation engineers to develop scripts based on the test cases that you have authored, and run these scripts automatically against the system under test. So by combining all these components or all the features of Microsoft, so this is how we have come up with a framework. As you can see here on the left side top, in TFS we will have the build definitions, test definitions, and repository. MTM will have all the testing related artifacts, so test suites, plans, and test cases, and it also will hold the lab definitions, which we'll see in live. And then on the coded UI side, on the automation front, we have the configuration file, which basically enables forward integration. That means, suppose you wanted to run the scripts on IE browser, so you can go to this configuration file and look for the tag browser type and give IE browser, IE as the input. It spins the execution on IE browser. Or for that matter, this config file can be used to target this whole execution onto the cloud. It could be Amazon. The libraries that we have built in-house in Gallup, and they are developed in such a way that they are completely independent by nature. They are generic. They can be used in any web applications and desktop-based applications, and it's kind of a simply plug and play kind of a thing. For any project across the portfolio, these components can be readily used and can be plugged in, and you're ready to go. You can start your scripting from there onwards. And then this is something that has to be built based on the on the application and the application functionality. Then we have the launch script. This basically enables us to integrate this whole suite with within the continuous integration server. So that is why we call this framework kind of CI enabled framework. So a job can be simply created, and this launch script can be scheduled within the job to trigger this whole process, and it seamlessly integrates with the continuous integration server or with the TFS server. And basically these drivers will help, will enable the whole framework to generate various reports, to read the data from the various data sources, and then we have a controller which basically deals with multiple agents. Like if you have a distributed environment and if you have multiple nodes, and each node is meant for a particular testing type, so all these nodes can be invoked at a time, and the whole suite can be run in parallel based on the labels or based on the tagging or based on the filters that you have applied to the test cases, and this controller will take care of those, and it will target those test cases onto the respective environment. There are some best practices which I already have covered. I have covered the configuration file, and then object management, then test case management, test data management, script modularity. So this I think most of you might be knowing. When we are talking about the hybrid framework approach, so we make sure that the scripts are decomposed to the best lowest module level, and we should have a lot of reusability in the script, so that whatever the generic functionality or whatever the common functionality across the application should be able to reuse it using these reusable assets. And you have to have a script review in process, and execution modes. These execution modes are like whether you wanted to do parallel execution on the same machine, or you wanted to do parallel execution on different machines and all that stuff, and then report generation. So we have discussed about the whole process, which is the the theoretical part of it, or which basically tells you, or which basically sets a platform for you to understand what is continuous integration and why continuous integration is in place these days, why people are moving to continuous integration, because Agile demands continuous integration, because the turnaround time should be less. And then we have discussed about the offerings of Microsoft tools, Microsoft tool set, and how it provides a single platform on which you can achieve the complete end-to-end SDLC and SDLC. Now let us see how this entire setup is done in live, just right before your eyes. So let me connect to my servers. So as you can see here, so I have a server which is basically a TFS server, and this server is this is the URL for that. And then I have a test controller. So we will see what is this controller, and this controller is again a different machine, and then agent. So typically the agent should be on a different machine, but for this purpose what we have done is, because it's difficult for you guys to see multiple windows, multiple machines and all that stuff, we have configured the agent on the same machine itself, on the not on the server itself rather. So basically this is TFS. We are using 2013, and then as you can see here, we have a solution built in TFS. So let me click on this. Yeah, so we have done I mean, this is how you have to organize your complete SDLC and SDLC process. So we have work, we have code, then we have the build configured from within, and once the build is done, then we have the testing activities or the testing jobs that will run. And then we have divided this whole thing, the whole project into multiple sprints. So if you see here in the work, okay, so we have features, So we have features defined here. So this is a sample feature I have defined, and then from the features I have derived the backlog items. So let's say I have 2 backlog items, and you can see the status here, right? One is approved, one is new. So that means this backlog item has been approved and it's done, kind of a thing. Okay, and this one, it's pretty much new, and the team is working on this. So because this one is approved and this is done, so we have assigned that to a sprint. Okay, so when we assign that to the sprint, so here we have I know what is the duration of the sprint. I know what is my capacity, how much I can achieve in that sprint. So then I know what is my team size. So based on all these details, I actually plan the work. So okay, for this particular backlog, I have enough time. So I felt like only one user is enough. So that's the reason we have assigned that to one user. And once this is done, as you can see here, so in this process we have queued the build, and the build queue is completed. So as you can see here, it is in the completed stage, and then because the build is successful and completed, what we have done is we have created a test plan. So from here the testing activity starts. So this test plan can be created from within TFS. So if you look at a high level, there are 2 types of users. So one group belongs to dev team and one group belongs to QA team. So say I have a product manager who controls both these teams. So sometimes the product manager or the product owner will feel like, okay, let me define everything. Okay, let me define the requirements, let me define the backlog items, and let me define the test, let me create the test plan as well. So in that case, those types of users can use TFS and they can do complete end-to-end in one interface. And say I have another team which is completely a testing team, and they wanted to use, or they wanted to do their activity, but they don't want to use this complex UI, or they wanted to use something completely very specific to testing. In that case, once this is done, I'm going to VSTS, and in VSTS okay, let me bring the MTM. Yeah, so this is MTM, and this this MTM stands for Microsoft Test Manager, which basically focuses on the testing aspects of it. So as you can see here, we have test center and the lab center. So in test center, again we get to see the same, the project, the test plan, and the requirements and the test cases here. Okay, so since TFS is the centralized server, whether you take this route or whether the QA guys take this route, or the test or the whole testing test suite is created from within TFS, you can see both the things completely integrated, and you can see the artifacts in both the interfaces, because both the interfaces are connected to one centralized server or one platform, or running on one platform. So as you can see here, we have the test cases here, and then for each test case we have the test steps defined here. And if you look at the lab center, so this is where basically you set up your environment, testing environment. So we can have, as I mentioned in my earlier slides, we should have a controller, we should have the agent and all that stuff. So basically we have the controller, and this is basically the agent. Typically if you look at the way this entire setup is done, so generally controller where MTM will be run on controller, and from controller you connect to the node machine, and then the test will be executed on the node. So all these three things are on three different machines. So server is on one machine, TFS, controller is on one machine, and your nodes or the agents are running on separate machines or the environments basically. So this is how this entire setup is done. So basically if you look at a typical test farm, you will get to see multiple nodes here, and each node is meant for a particular testing type, or it's up to you how you wanted to plan. Now once we have everything set up, so a manual tester, if he wants to do the testing, he can do the testing from here itself. So he doesn't have to worry about the automation stuff. And yeah, so this is the settings manager, and this is the controller machine basically. Okay. And if you wanted to do in an automated fashion, and you wanted to run this entire testing on an automated way, then we go to Visual Studio. Yeah, so as you can see here, so we have a solution developed here using coded UI. So again, this is an offering from Visual Studio, as we discussed earlier. So you can write your scripts from within Visual Studio using coded UI, using various unit testing frameworks. And as you can see here on the right side, we have the solution created. Then we have the all other components. So basically the business modules will contain the application specific functions, and the data config will contain the test data configuration settings, like from where you wanted to pull the data source, and where you wanted to archive the results. If it is a database, then that settings can be done here. And then we have the libraries, which we discussed about the generic utility libraries. We have logger, which basically deals with the creation of various dashboards or customized reports, which can be basically used by the business users and the automation users. Then we have modules, and these modules will contain, say you have a complete system where the complete functionality of the system has been divided into modules, so you can have different modules defined here, and you can have the respective test cases associated to those modules. This is the reporting utility. And then we have the test data, the test input data. Then we have the tests. So we have created some tests here. Verify login is one test that we have created. And then we have the the configuration settings here. So once this is done, once the setup is done, so we have the solutions here, and then we have the so we have the continuous integration setup here. So we have configured certain builds here, and once these builds are triggered, and once the build is successful, it automatically triggers the job. So as you can see here, how we have done the complete configuration settings. So let me quickly take you through this. So if you look at the triggers, so this is where we have to set the continuous integration. So once this is set, this entire automation suite will be run from within the continuous integration server. And then here we have the the source controller from where the this complete solution has to be picked up. And then we have the build. So once the build is done, so we are copying the build onto this particular target location. And so once the build is available and all that stuff, so we have to point the testing or the automation to that particular environment. So this is where we have configured the environment. Okay. Okay, fine. So let's look at the, let's do little changes into the application, and let's see how it triggers the test execution. So let me make some change here, and let me save the changes and check in. So let me do some changes. So once I check in, I'm doing the, I mean once I make the changes, I'm doing the build process. So this basically saves the build, and once we do check in, so once we check in, so as you can see here, the build, it started running. So once this build is successful, automatically you will see it launches the application, and you'll get to see, the automated script is running against that particular application. So all this is happening automatically. So once we did the check-in, it has launched the application, and then it logs into the application, and the rest all is like the typical test test automation, like we assert on certain value, we make sure that it's pass or fail, and once the complete execution is done. So what we have done here is, as part of our framework, so it basically generates a customized HTML based report, and this report can be viewed from within your TFS. So this is another test. So we have we have written a couple of tests for as part of this session. So if you look at currently how the industry is moving towards moving towards the mobility space, and also if you look at the whole industry is moving towards kind of a data analytics or big data kind of a project. So the next step, like in the industry, what is happening around continuous integration is people are coming up with various approaches or various frameworks through which we can achieve mobile automation testing through continuous integration. As I mentioned earlier, using the browser stack or social apps, where the environment will be spinned based on your configuration settings. And on the other side, when it comes to data analytics or big data type of projects, so the backend server or the database server plays a major role. So the IT industry is trying to come up with an approach how database testing can be done from within continuous integration. So generally, if you look at most of the times the build fails because of the mismatch between the database version and the build version. So we run the developers will think that okay, everything is fine, the backend is the database is also upgraded or the scripts are run, but when the build fails, when they see the logs, they find most of the time that it has run on the older version of the database or older version of the schema. So to make sure to reduce those kind of failures, the whole industry is moving towards integrating the database level testing from within continuous integration. Okay, so once this run is done, so this is the customizer, report that I was talking about. So this report will have two levels. One is the summary and another one is the details. So it basically captures the whole environment so that you can get to see on what environment it has run, then the number of test cases. And if you wanted to see the details, so just click on that. It will take you to the next page where you will get to see the detailed steps of the test cases. So in case of failure, you'll get to see a cross mark and a link. So if you click on that link, it will take you, it will take you to the screen or the screenshot where the failure has happened. So that is this whole framework configured such a way that in case of failure, it captures the screenshot. So this is all about achieving or implementing continuous integration using the Microsoft tools. As you can see in this whole process, there are no other third-party tools are integrated, or there is no other server on which some other settings has been done and all that stuff. Everything is unified into one system, that is Microsoft tool sets, and everything can be done from on one platform, to make sure there is a common architecture implemented across the organization or across the projects. So that is the beauty of doing continuous integration setup using Microsoft tools. So thank you guys. Thank you very much for joining this session and for listening me.
Yeah, thank you, Ravi. We will take on the questions now from the audience. Because of shortage of time, if we are not able to cover the response to any of the questions, the audience can actually send an email to marketing@gallup.net, and we will definitely get back to them with the responses. We will allow a couple of questions for now, maybe around 4 or 5 questions we can take from the audience now.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, seems like we had one question from Samir, who said, "Can we manage sprint and Scrum details through Microsoft tools?" Ravi, would you like to answer that?
Yes, of course. Like as we saw in the beginning of the session. So TFS, if you look at Team Foundation Server, it provides the templates through which you can manage the complete application lifecycle. You can plan your sprints and you can track your backlog items, and you can do everything that is required for you to work in the Agile environment. So Microsoft offers two templates. One is the Agile and another one is the SDLC, waterfall. So you can pick any one of the templates based on your environment, and you get to see the whole the screens and everything customized as per the template. So if you pick Agile, you get to see user stories, sprints, backlog items, and all that stuff. And if it is waterfall, you get to see requirement specifications, high level designing, low level designing, all that stuff in a sequential manner.
All right, Ravi.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, Ravi, I think people are on mute, so let me go on to the next question. We have the next question from Chris, who is asking, is there a way to implement a continuous integration type setup within a waterfall methodology? Also, can it be run with tests written in any programming language such as Python?
Yeah, so since this particular session was more focusing on the Microsoft tools, so that's the reason I did not mention anything about the other tools and technologies. But yes, it is possible, and it is not compulsory that this whole setup has to be done for only Agile. So the process and the setup, these two are two different things. So continuous integration says that everything has to be done automatically unattended. It never says that it has to be done in case of Agile. So it is possible, yes.
Okay, great. Chris says a thank you. Thank you, Chris. And then we have another question which says, what are the different types of plugins which are available to integrate with other tools such as databases, issue management tools, and so on? The question is by Mayur.
Yeah, for to address the database thing, like for database, again we don't have to use any plugins, so that can be done by simply creating a job, kind of a triggering the database level test cases, and all these database level test cases can be written from within Visual Studio using the unit testing framework. Okay, you can establish a connection to the DB server using ODBC or ADODB and all that concepts. Secondly, for the defect management, again within MTM or in TFS you see a defect module where you can post the defects, and once you post the defects they will start appearing to all the developers because it is integrated with the TFS server. Based on the defects, again backlogs can be created, and again this whole process can be triggered.
Okay. And Ravi, there is another question. Will it support IE11 with coded UI?
Yes, yeah, it supports. So say if coded UI alone doesn't support, because coded UI is built on top of Selenium WebDriver concept. So using the Selenium WebDriver from within coded UI, yes, it support. You can achieve support for IE browser testing, IE11.
All right. And does it work for mobile testing also?
Yes, yeah. So Microsoft has a module through which we can do mobile testing. We can also do web services or API level testing. So it can be done.
Okay. Can we summarize a little bit on how different is this from Jenkins or Hudson, as it also provides the same set of functionalities with a little effort on configuration side? This is Mayur's question.
Okay. So when we are talking about Jenkins, so as we have seen here, so Jenkins first of all doesn't provide any repository. Okay. So for repository you have to have various other servers like Nexus or whatever. So Jenkins only provides a ID from within. You can configure all these tasks. For each task again you have to write a customized script or a customized code, and configure that code from within the Jenkins jobs. That is one thing. And secondly, Jenkins doesn't provide any templates like Agile or waterfall. So it only focuses on the continuous integration configuration part. But when it comes to Microsoft tools with the TFS, you can have the whole repository. You can have the software configuration management as well. And you using MTM you can define your test cases, you can create your test plans and everything. Using Lab Center you can configure controller nodes and achieve distributed execution in parallel. And it also has the defect module, and it also offers a automation engine that is coded UI. So this is kind of complete end-to-end process. It covers complete end-to-end process. Jenkins by itself it doesn't provide anything. It only enables the user to configure various settings based on the setup that you have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ravi, for the highly information packed session today. And to all of our audience, there are a couple of questions also which are still pending. We would definitely try to answer them if the audience sends an email at marketing@gallup.net. And hope all of you had an informative session today. The recording of this webinar will be shared with you in a day's time. And if you have any further questions at any time, please do feel free to visit the website of www.gallup.net. And for inquiries, you can send an email to marketing@gallup.net. Thank you so much and have a great day.